Welcome back to the Means Report. Great conversation with Dr. Sandra Rinke, ASU political scientist, in our first segment about Osama bin Laden. And interesting to note that the world's #1 terrorist was the only person who could knock the devastation that we saw across the southeast a week before last out of the headlines. But bin Laden did, if only for a few days. But our thoughts never waned or got diverted from those people who are dealing with that devastation. Let's take a look at what our friends in Alabama and Georgia faced immediately after those storms hit.
That is something that you pray that you never, ever, ever see.
All night across the South, people looked up, looked out for tornadoes. This one in Tuscaloosa.
Goodness, look at that.
That is huge.
Terrible as it arrived and after it left.
It looks like we got hit by a 5,000-pound bomb here.
Tuscaloosa's mayor says the city's infrastructure is decimated, at least a dozen killed, 100 injured, and emergency responders have to get through the mess to rescue them. Here, a young girl survived. There are more than 140 tornado reports from Mississippi to Maryland.
That was the front of the house.
The worst damage so far is in Alabama, where at least 60 people died, and President Obama has declared an emergency.
Before it hit, there was branches falling out of the sky before we even knew the tornado was coming.
Nearly all the town landmarks in Smithville, Mississippi are gone. There were only moments to run. Here's what the mayor did.
We grabbed our quilt and our personal belongings, and we went into the boardroom and got under the board table. And when it was over with, everything's gone.
Now there are more problems, like in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Hit with flooding, now hail, making people wonder when it's safe to say these storms have truly passed.
And of course, since that story aired, the death toll in Tuscaloosa alone is pushing 40 now as they continue to search for survivors, even all these many days later, underneath all that rubble that they have yet to go through. Our Chief Meteorologist, George Myers, is here to give us some perspective on those storms and how gigantic and devastating and deadly they were. George, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Let's talk about the outbreak of a few days ago versus the last massive tornado outbreak we talk about, which was in 1974.
That's right. This has turned out to be the most numerous tornadoes ever reported in one tornadic event. Marlena, take a look at our graphic, if you will. Take that for us, and you'll see that in this event, which occurred April 25th through April 28th, there was 305 tornadoes, 318 fatalities, and that mark of 305, that's the most tornadoes ever recorded in one particular event. The 318 fatalities, that is the 5th highest fatality rate ever in the U.S. when it comes to tornadoes. Now, Brad mentioned the 1974 outbreak. That was the previous record of most tornadoes in one event, and that was 148. So this last event just destroyed that record. And of course, back in 74, 305 people died. So this is the biggest event ever in U.S. history by far.
Why so many deaths when we have capabilities of tracking hurricanes from their infancy all the way to our front door over a period of weeks, yet this tornado sneaks up on us, these tornadoes sneaked up on us and killed so many people? Didn't people have warning?
They had warning, and you could see a fatality rate this high back in 1974. There was no cell phones, no computers, no cable TV. You had 3 local network stations maybe in your market if you were lucky. Back then it was difficult to get a warning on TV, and so back then folks might not have been as aware as they were today. But the Weather Service was on top of this, and I think one of the main reasons the fatality rate was so high was just the plain number of twisters and their strength. Take a look at this next graphic. This tells us how many twisters touched down and how strong they were. EF stands for the Enhanced Fujita Scale. It used to be just the Fujita Scale, named after the gentleman who founded that scale to measure tornadoes, but it's been modified over the past few years, so now it's EF, an Enhanced Fujita Scale, 5 being the strongest of all tornadoes. Now, there was 2 EF5 twisters in this outbreak. That means winds in excess of 200 miles an hour. Rarely do you see hurricane sustained winds like that. There were 14 EF4s. That's winds of 166 to 200 miles an hour. And look at the number of EF3s in the mid-range. And these are monsters too. There's 21 EF3s with winds of 136 to 165 miles an hour. 47 EF2s, winds of 111 to 135, and 60 EF1s, 86 miles an hour to 110. So the sheer magnitude of twisters and just how powerful they were, what really can people do? Because the Tuscaloosa tornado, that was 1.5 miles wide and was on the ground for 80 miles. That's from here to Columbia. And so even with warnings from the Weather Service, which did a great job, the only thing folks can do, their only defense, is to get underground in a basement.
Okay, so if I'm not underground, but I've followed all the steps, and we'll talk about these in a minute,
Sure.
of getting to the innermost room, putting as many walls between myself
Right.
and Mother Nature as I can, when an EF5's on top of my house, I still might not stand a chance.
And we've seen the video. There's nothing left but slivers of wood from people's homes. So there is no defense. The Weather Service gave a 5-day forecast, and they were predicting 5 days before this hit that it was going to occur. So people had warning, and there was a 24-minute lead time for every tornado warning issued. So folks had 24 minutes once that warning was issued before the twister hit. And so you can't evacuate the entire state of Alabama. I mean, everybody in Birmingham and Mobile and Montgomery, Tuscaloosa can't go to Georgia. So their only defense is to get underground, but not everybody had cellars. So they're really, in this case, with twisters this strong and this powerful and so numerous, I don't know if there's a defense against it, even when you know it's coming.
Well, I'll ask you this too. I spent the better part of 9 years in Alabama, 7 of them in Tuscaloosa. And you hear tornado warnings all the time. Might people in those parts of the country that are those tornado alleys become used to the warnings and somewhat numb to them?
It's very possible. Who could have possibly anticipated something this horrible, even when you're told tornadoes are coming, but who could picture entire towns wiped out? And despite the fact we have information flowing from all directions 24 hours a day, it may still be difficult for people to grasp that this is going to hit my house and my town. It's hard to imagine.
What are some safety measures we can take? I would love for you to just take a moment to review those again, especially if we face something coming toward us in the near future.
Well, you said it. The rule of thumb is to put as many walls between you and the outside of the house for protection. So you want to get it in the interior portion of your house, a bathroom or a closet. We saw numerous reports of folks who climbed in their bathtub and pulled blankets or a mattress on top of them. And it was like a mini bunker.
Yep.
And that side of the tub was the last thing standing in their home that saved their lives. So an interior closet, hallway, or bathroom is the best place to go. And obviously, if you have a basement, get underground. Recent years, statistics have shown that 70–80% of all tornado fatalities are folks who live in mobile homes. A great place to live. I spent many years in a mobile home, but they just don't have a foundation. So if you have friends who have a conventional structure with a strong foundation, and the forecast is calling for a good chance of tornadoes, it's best to head over to their place for the night and hunker it out there.
George, what if, goodness forbid, you're in your automobile? You've told me before, get in a ditch. What do you do? Do you pull your car over and you just put your body in the ditch and hope?
Well, our first reaction would be to step on the gas and go. Right?
Yeah.
But if it's raining and there's debris on the highway and the winds are blowing, you can't go 70–80 miles an hour on the highway. So the experts say, and this takes some courage, is to get out of your car and get into a ditch or a ravine for cover and stay there until the twister passes. There's also, there was advice earlier that experts told folks to get under an overpass, into a bridge, but this has turned out to be false information. It's best not to do that. Sometimes when the twister goes through there, it can create a good deal of damage and harm to anybody not low along the ground or in a ravine. So it's not best to hide under an overpass, an interstate overpass or a bridge, something like that. So the best thing to do is get out of your car and get as low as you possibly can.
All right, George, great information and great perspective on what happened to this nation in recent days. We appreciate it. Chief Meteorologist George Myers, watch him every day here on WJBF News Channel 6. We remember those victims in Alabama and Georgia, that's for sure, and we still reach out to try to help them. How you can chip in when the Means Report continues.